Well, hello and a very warm welcome back to the channel. And the A34 seems to be the start of many of my videos. I'm on the new K1600 and it's in for her first service. So she's now done approaching 700 miles and she's going to go back in to have the oil dropped out and various other things. I have to say that I find all of this running in on modern equipment a little bit farcical. I mean, it's not like back in the 70s when, you know, you'd take the sump plug out to drain the oil out and swarf and filings would be found in the oil. Everything is now machined by computer to within an inch of its life. So I don't think for one moment that necessarily running in is a necessary thing, but I have done those 700 miles avoiding motorway whenever I can. Of course, I've had to ride the bike from the dealers down to home for 65, 70 miles, and I'm riding her up today 65 or 70 miles. But the rest of it has been done uphill, down dale, you know, across the gearbox. Not overstraining the engine, but definitely running her through all of the rev ranges up to sort of, you know, 5,000 RPM. So just taking it easy. So it'll be good once she's done. Now, what else did I want to do? Having done 700 mile on her now, I'm getting a little bit more of a feel for her. She's starting to feel a little bit more like my bike. We are at the moment having a massive heat wave in the United Kingdom. Let me tell you that at the moment. I mean, my TFT is reading 37. I don't actually believe that, to be perfectly honest. I think that's probably reading 3 degrees higher. I think it's probably something like 34 or 35 degrees, but all the same, it is pretty warm. But what I'd like to do is to go through a few things that I love and a few things that I really hate about the K1600. I should lighten off the hate. It's a lot of these things that I do are fairly trivial, and a lot of people would say, well, just ride the goddamn motorbike, Nick. But anyway, let's run through a few. The biggest bugbear that I have is the phone holder. This is the phone holder here, this panel here, and the button to open it is here on the side. Now, why do I get so annoyed about that? Well, there's a number of things. One, we don't have wireless charging on this motorcycle, therefore you need to have a wire. The wire is a USB-C end, and my phone is an iPhone, so it has a lightning connector on the phone end of it, and that has to be at 90 degrees. If you've got any of the Max phones, you can forget having them in that compartment because they won't fit. Mine is a standard, well, I say a standard, it's an iPhone 13 Pro, I think. It does have a small case on it, but it's not a big, thick quad lock case. It's a, you know, relatively thin gel case, and you have to have a 90-degree lightning connector and a USB-C on the other. Now, that in itself is difficult to find. Now try and find one that only has about 6 or 8 inches of cable. It's impossible. So what I've done is I've had a very short couple of inch USB-C to USB-A converter, and then I've got a 6 or 8 inch USB A to lightning 90-degree connector, and it does work and it does fit, but it is like, I don't know, doing your daughter's plaits every day trying to get the cable in there. Certainly if you've got anything over a foot long, you're really going to struggle. So that's probably my biggest disappointment about this bike. Now, on the reverse side of that, for those of you that have followed the channel for quite some time, the connected app works. It's not been 100%, but it has been probably over 90%, which is all I require from it. And really, the whole situation with the connected app for me has completely changed, to the point where I'm even considering now doing a video on the K1600 TFT with the connected app, which of course will apply also to the RT, because that has the 10¼ inch TFT, and I'm sure that given another couple of years the GS will have this TFT as well. The GS has the 6.5, so basically up to the split in my screen pretty well, not quite, but pretty well. Now, it's a slightly different system on here, in as much as I still run the turn-by-turn indications like you get on the GS, and the speed limit comes from the Bluetooth connection to the TFT from your phone. But the the map view comes from the Wi-Fi, and you can perhaps see on the screen there the little Wi-Fi symbol. So you have an inboard Wi-Fi. Don't think that you've got to be connected to the internet. You don't need to be connected to the internet. It is that the bike creates its own local network, local Wi-Fi network, and your phone connects to that. Now, one thing I will tell everybody, I'm wondering if I haven't found the reason for my GS playing up so much. And that is that one of the things I find with this system, and the only time that this system has actually dropped out, is when I switch Spotify on after I've started a ride. And I think what that is doing is, I think Spotify is taking, if you like, the focus, the lead app on the mobile phone over and above the connected app, and I think that's what makes it drop. And the only reason that makes me think that is because when you lose Wi-Fi on this bike, you'll find that the map view, as you see it now, disappears, the colour map view, and you go back to the GS turn-by-turn type signals. And if I then go down and actually switch off the Spotify, then the map view comes back almost immediately. What has also been pretty well fixed, it seems by now, is the fact that previously on the RT, I remember people complaining, and my mate Sean has an RT, 2021 RT with a big TFT, and the problem there is when you took a phone call, it would drop the Wi-Fi, and therefore, because it dropped the Wi-Fi, it dropped the connection to the maps. And then when you hung up the call, it often wouldn't reconnect to the Wi-Fi, so you would end up with permanently turn-by-turn signals. That too has been fixed. So I got to say, I am loving the connected app. What a turnaround that is. So that's a couple of things. So another of the things that I like on here are the trivialities, and particularly with temperatures, it's saying 37, but let's presume 34, 35, which is most unusual for us, is weather protection. We're normally looking for protection from wind and rain and ice and all of those other things on a motorcycle, but now we all know, of course, that you can be too hot on a motorcycle. One of the things I thought was a real gimmick at the dealership were these wings here at the front. Now, I don't know whether you can see that with the GoPro here, if I just have a little bit of a stare at them. They're open at the moment, but that is a major boon to this motorcycle, which has amazing all-round weather protection. And they're manual, so you just push them back in like that, or you pull them back out. Now I've got them in the out position, and that is blowing, admittedly today warm air, but that is blowing a defined stream of air across the top of the tank here and into the upper reaches of my nether regions and my stomach. It is absolutely defined, and you can very much feel that happening. Now, moving on further to weather protection, you can see that I've got the screen at the moment in the full upright position, and part of the reason that I've got it in the full upright position is it does make it easier for you to hear me talking on the microphone, but it does very much have a defined air that disappears over my head by probably 4 to 6 inches. Now I can see here just over the top of the screen, which is ideal because I don't want to look through the screen because that's going to get dirty, it's going to get rain on it, and with no wipers your visibility is going to be severely affected. So even in the upright position I can see through that gap in the middle very clearly in front of me. Now okay, my visor could very much be dirty and steamed up and everything else, but that's another issue. So if we have that in the upright position, you can see that the protection it has, but something I believe should come very soon on the GS and the like, and it certainly is already on the RT, which is a very similar motorcycle to this, I got to say, and we're going to be doing a comparison, my friend Sean and I, between the 2021 RT, which is the new TFT screen and everything, and the new K1600 when we're away in September, I hope. So keep an eye out for that video. But here I am talking normally, and let me lower the electric screen. That's another benefit, an electric screen. You'll be surprised how many times you alter your screen for optimum airflow when you have the ability to do so easily. But if I now don't change my speed at 72 miles an hour on the speedo, probably just about legal limit on the road, 70 miles an hour. If I now start to lower, That is now in the fully down position, as you probably can see on this GoPro camera, because that will now be in view of that GoPro. And hopefully you can hear quite aurally there how much that has changed the overall wind. And if I climb it back up again and carry on talking as I do so, you should be able to hear me very much come back into the room. So that's another great benefit of the K1600. Of course, it applies to the RT also. Now let's get on a little bit to the more serious stuff. One of the things I have noticed on the K1600 GT in particular, and I think this is a little less so on the GTL, which is the luxury sort of spongier version of the GT, is the fact that the suspension is very hard. I've got it on auto. You can have it on dynamic, which I think would probably stiffen it up more, but there is no option below this to lower it. Now, having come from a GS and a GS Adventure, you will know, if you've ridden one of those, that you have the luxury of probably one of the longest travel suspensions in the world, and that of course is brought around to help with the GS's off-road capability. But you'll basically see a pothole in front of you, so I would see a pothole on a road as I move forward, and on a GS you would think, oh, it's a pothole. You would hit it and think, well, what was I worried about? On the K1600, if you hit that pothole, you know you've hit it. It's very much a jarring sensation. But I think with sort of 320 kilos, I'm pretty sure about 80 kilos more than the GS Adventure, you do need that stiffer suspension, because I've got to say, this thing handles, for me, to my talent level, this thing handles surprisingly well. The engine is of course leaning forward, so it's slung very, very low as they could possibly make it. And you know, off the connected app you get telemetrics, and my normal best corners on my GS and GS Adventure were, you know, 35 degrees, maybe 37 degrees, and I've already done 35 degrees on this, and it felt perfectly planted and perfectly able to cope with those corners. So it is, for its weight, a relatively nimble bike. I'm not saying it is flickable, but it certainly is not bad handling. Now, let's get on to the main feature and the part that I absolutely love. There is no denying the quality and the reliability of the Boxer engine, but equally, it gets its tractor name through, I suppose, real-world statistics of engine noise and ruggedness. It couldn't be anywhere near described as a smooth engine. It's okay when you're accelerating it hard, but you know you've got that twin horizontally opposed underneath you plodding away. And I've got no complaints. I loved my GSs and my GSAs, as you know. But this motorcycle, with its 6 cylinders, of course, there is no getting away from the fact that a straight 6 should be much better than any twin, let alone a horizontally opposed twin. But the other thing as well is that I notice about this bike is, here I am, oh, I'm still in 5th gear actually. That quite often happens with me when I'm on cruise control. Let's just pump it into 6th with the quick shifter. But if I look at this bike now at 72 miles an hour in 6th, just watch. And that's enough of that, I have to say, because I'm not a lawbreaker. But its response to the throttle is absolutely unbelievable in pretty much any gear. And that's the other thing too. With the GSs, if you happen to get to a junction and you forget and you're in 2nd, or you're in slow traffic and you're in 3rd and you've not gone down to 1st, you will do one or two things. You will have to give it a very light clutch and a fistful of throttle and hope, or you will stall. With this one, I'm not saying you can pull away in 2nd or 3rd, but certainly in traffic, she is a lot more sort of controllable in pretty much any gear. And I suppose that maybe brings me on to one of the other features, and that is that obviously with a bike of this width, you are probably in traffic a little bit more than I would have been with the GS. where I could filter. I was always very nervous with the GS when I had the full pannier set on and everything else, and I don't think for one moment this is more than probably 6 inches wider than the GS with the panniers on and with my panniers on here. But this does feel at the mirrors, it's all in line. The mirrors are pretty well in line with the end of the handlebars, and the panniers are pretty well in line with the end of the handlebars. So it is all pretty well in line. So you've got things to gauge it with, but it's not ideal. Now, the other thing as well to go with the engine, the gearbox with the clutch is just as clunky as the GS, in as much as, you know, you pull up at a motorcycle meet and you get back on your bike after a coffee and you start the engine, and the K1600 sounds fantastic when you first start her. The GS less so, but they both, any bike sounds great when you first start them and just give them a little blip of the throttle. Then you know that you're going to embarrass yourself when you put it into first gear. The K1600 is absolutely no different. It still has that reliable clunk and the vibration in your left foot as it drops into first. What this one does have, however, and I believe from my mate Sean the RT does too, and I think this might be to do with the overall length of the linkage from the gear stick up to where it actually actuates the gearbox, but that is the fact that the quick shifter and the blipper on here is absolutely smooth as butter. So here we are in 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, all using the blipper and the quick shifter. So in other words, it's probably smoother with the quick shifter and the blipper than it is with the clutch, but I'd say probably just about equal with the GS for the clunkiness of the gearbox. So what about the first service? Well, the first service has got to have a software update, which should show on the software version on the TFT. Touch wood this time. I have no wood. I have to imagine wood when I say that. It's nothing to do with the connected. As I've already said, I'm happy enough with the connected app. But I think many motor vehicle manufacturers are suffering this, and that is that I think BMW have had to fit a new chip for part of, not all of, but part of the traction control system. I had to sign a little bit of paper when I took the bike to say the bike was perfectly safe, but I needed to be aware that I think it was the wheelie control had a new sensor fitted, but that the software hadn't yet been developed to incorporate that sensor. I may be wrong in what I've said there, but it wasn't something they were particularly worried about, or on a 320 kilo motorcycle wheelie control, I'm not sure I'm really worried about either. But they will be updating the software to include that. I should be collecting the top box to go with this. But the motorcycle itself took 10 weeks to get to the dealers when I thought it was going to be 4 to 6, and the top box is going to be, after those 10 weeks, a further 6 to 8 weeks. So I won't actually be getting the top box before the end of August, which means my trip to France in the middle of August, or middle to late August, I won't have a top box. So I'm hoping that they are going to loan me one. The luggage system on here, both the top box and the panniers, being identical to the BMW RT. So I'm hoping they'll lend me that, but it's definitely, BMW have got very big supply problems without any doubt. Interestingly, I spoke to the dealership. They make very few concessions on the amount of sales that they've got to make, however. Just talking about the luggage, one of the other things that I do love is the central locking. Again, it's a feature that's on the RT. But the beauty of it is you can unlock the cases independently, and you can isolate the cases from the central locking system by putting them into a manual position on the lock. But the central locking is superb. You know, you can be on the motorcycle here, I can press the locking button and you'll see on the TFT in the middle here, there you go, a key has popped up, and now my panniers, both sides, my top box, which I don't have at the moment, but I will have, and my 2 luggage compartments, my 2 little cubby holes down here on the fairing, have now actually locked. And that's the same when you use the keyless button in the middle of the BMW button in the middle of the keyless ride key. That first off locks all of the cases, and secondly, second press then arms your alarm. So another feature that I like is the central locking. Now, with a 320 kilo motorcycle, and I'm probably using it in some areas where I don't need to use it, and it is making me very lazy as a parking motorcyclist. One of the things you learn fairly quickly on a motorcycle, particularly bigger motorcycles, is you want to reverse into spaces if they're on any kind of incline, because you want to be able to ride uphill rather than trying to waddle backwards up a hill on a tall GS with quarter of a ton, and this is even more so on this. So one of the things that I do really like about this one is, of course, the reverse. So if we look on the handlebar here, you'll see a button with R on it by my quad lock, a button with R on it, and that is the reverse gear. And you actuate that by starting the bike, making sure the bike is in neutral, pressing the R button, and the gear indicator that would be green for N for neutral will switch over to a blue like this, R. And you will have engaged reverse gear. And whilst the engine is running, it's not using the engine to reverse. You actually press the starter motor button, and it is using the starter motor. So it's a very controlled reverse, and I have to say I'm using it probably far more than I really need to, but it's another feature that I really like. Now, one of my small dislikes, for no particular reason that it makes it difficult to mount anything, are the forged handlebars. Now, you can get this model, the GT, with the bagger tubular handlebars, but boy, they are ugly handlebars, number one. And number two, I don't think that it would suit this bike. So I'm not really complaining about the forged handlebars per se. I think they're quite attractive, they're very solid, of course, but it does mean that if you're going to mount anything on them, there isn't a single round surface, circular surface. Now, you can very easily, and that's what I've done here with my quad lock, you can very easily get little stubs, which there's a screw inside here, say that again, here, and that will allow you to put the stub in here, and the stub sticks out here, a round stub, and that's exactly what I've got here for my quad lock. You won't be able to see it, but you can sort of probably, actually if I just tip my head to the edge there, you can probably just about see it on the end of there. So I've got one on. Whether I put a second one on this side for the GoPro, I don't know, because I have actually mounted my GoPro over here, which is quite a nice position for it. I'm just wondering, however, though, if it makes that mirror vibrate a little bit more. I might be imagining that, but it is quite nice. The only trouble with it is, as we saw earlier, when I bring the screen down, the screen does become in the view of the GoPro. But having said that, that was with the screen in the totally lowered position, and I'm unlikely to ever ride the bike with it actually, we'll get a bit noisier now, but with it actually lower than, say, there. And I think I can go down still further to probably about there before the screen starts to come into view, so almost to the bottom position. So that's one of the little bugbears, is just the inability to mount anything on the forged handlebars. So one other thing that I am quite surprised about is I don't feel quite as low on this bike as I did on the RT. Now, I may be imagining that, but some of you will know that the thing I really loved about the GS was the true height that you were at on the road and the road presence that you had. And this almost seems to be a bit of a halfway house between the two. I don't feel intimidated by lorries or anything else on this bike. I mean, obviously the bike has presence because it's a big, lumpy bike with a very, very good headlight, of course. It's got the brand new LED adaptive headlight, which moves on lean angle and turn and all the rest of those types of things. So, you know, maybe I'm pretty bright anyway. I don't have any additional auxiliary lights on the bike yet, and I may not even fit any. But as you can hopefully see as I approach this Audi A4 Estate, for example, I can see clearly over the top of him to what I think is a Galaxy. I can't really see the thing there, but the guy with the roof bars in front of that, I can see clearly right down to his boot strip, to his chrome boot strip. And if we do get an opportunity coming alongside this lorry, I used to be able pretty much to be level with the bottom of the cab. So the top of my helmet is probably now level with the cab, rather than me being able almost to see into the cab. So it's another thing that I'm not displeased about, that I knew I was losing from the GS Adventure, but I don't think it seems to be quite as low as the RT that I tried early last year. Another thing I do like is the look of this bike. It has a completely different look, of course, very, very streamlined, but I do like the look of it. And actually, whilst I'm not really a red, white and blue guy, and I did say about the colourway of my old GS Adventure that I'm not really a red, white and blue guy, and here I am on a red, white and blue motorcycle. It does have black though, that's what I hold on to, but it definitely has you know, a reasonable look to this bike. Although somebody did say in the comments when I first got it that I think I did a low down shot and they said it looked like a Lambretta. There's always one. So one thing that you do notice as well with the seating position on this bike is the fact that the pegs are swept backwards. So it's very, very similar again to the RT. You know, the RT seems to be what this was really modelled on way back when they first brought out the K series, because the pegs are very much swept back, far more swept back position than the GS. Now, whether that will be more comfortable on a long ride or less comfortable, I think probably my trip to France will tell me, but I very much tend to ride on my toes, so that very much leaves me with my feet a long way back. And I don't know, without having a pillion on, but I don't know how our feet may get entangled when that is the case. But I could equally ride it in the standard position with my feet flat on the pegs. But if I have my feet flat on the pegs, I tend to sit back on the bike, and I'm not necessarily reaching for the handlebars, but if I put my feet forward, I'm sort of positioning my body forward and very, very slightly leaning on the handlebars, and that gives me an opportunity to straighten my arms or to flex my arms, whereas if I put them flat, I'm almost sat back in the chair rather than sitting forward in the chair. But it still is, whichever way you use it, a very sporty position. Brakes, very quickly, very similar to the GS Adventure. The front brake is incredibly good, the rear brake not quite so. My Adventure rear brake was, well, to me it seemed to be almost useless. I used to every service pretty well have them adjust it up and bleed it out, and it was better for a little while and then dropped away. But at least this one doesn't have the degree of travel that the Adventure had. You know, you can apply the brake, but you wouldn't want to be relying upon that to stop this beast if that was the only brake you had. Now, it's a bit of a stupid statement, because of course it's not the only brake you've got, and you've got an incredibly good front brake, and certainly the front brake is equally as good as the Adventure. One of the things I'm not totally convinced of at the moment, although I do quite like the theory of it, I didn't to start with, because I thought, what would I ever use a radio for? I got Spotify, but of course we already know that Spotify may interfere with the connected app. So I am actually listening to the radio more and more. The thing that is slightly disappointing about the radio, and I don't know whether this is a problem with the unit I've got, a problem with the software, or whether it's because they built the aerial now down into the motorcycle rather than having the stick aerial that used to come up with the RT and the old K1600s, and that is that it doesn't seem to hold on to channels very well. I'd expect it to lose local radio stations, but I wouldn't expect it to lose national radio stations unless you were really in a forest or somewhere and the trees were acting like antenna. And to be perfectly honest, pretty well anywhere I've been around locally, I've not been able to get BBC Radio 5 Live, which would be one of the ones that I would want to watch, or would want to listen to, because that has cricket commentary and that has football commentary. So I'm not totally convinced about the radio yet. I do like the favourite buttons down here. So the 4 favourite buttons on the side of the fairing there are customisable. Now, I've not probably finished customising them yet, and I may well customise in the winter more towards heated grips and heated seat than what I've got it at the moment, but certainly numbers 1 and 4 I'm using extensively. I have 1 for the radio. Now, what that actually does, if I press number 1, I'll actually do that just so that you can see, it brings up the TFT menu option. So there we have it, straight to radio, ready for me to push the whizzy wheel and connect the radio. I won't do that because we're talking. In fact, I'll move that back up to its parking position. It's pure ride mode. But the number 4 I've got actually set to mute, and that is brilliant because so many times I've been up and stopped by people and they tried to chat with you with your helmet on and your music on full blast in your helmet, and they're talking and you can't hear a word, and you've got your finger up saying, whoa, whoa, wait, and then you're flicking around with the menu buttons and the whizzy wheel and everything else. Now I just press button number 4 and I am muted. So the favourite buttons, both again available on the K1600 and the RTs, are definitely a benefit. One surprising benefit that I didn't even account for, to be perfectly honest, my old GS Adventure had a Boomot toolbox which hung on the inside of the panniers, and most GSs have got some description. I had a Wunderlich one on for a while. Some people have the Touratech ones, various ones off eBay, but they basically sit inside the pannier frame on the left-hand side, inside the pannier. So I had a decent toolkit that I used to carry around with me. Now, nobody ever hopes that they need to use a toolkit, but I like to carry it all the same. So I'm thinking to myself, where am I actually going to put that on the K1600? Well, under the rider's seat, Nicholas. Under the rider's seat, behind the battery, there is actually a massive void. And everything that I had in my Boomot, not in the Wunderlich one, which was a bit bigger, but everything that I had in my Boomot toolbox fitted in that void and on top of the battery case under the rider's seat. So it's easily accessible with a key, and I have nothing in my luggage that resembles a tool. Now, I have to say, I have a little pouch with lots of Torx, hex and screwdriver bits in it, and a little tiny driver. That didn't fit under the seat, so that is actually putting part of my space in the left cubby hole down here, which of course is lockable. So everything is secure, and my whole toolkit is on my motorcycle, which is incredibly surprising. So there we have it. That's a little rundown of my first 700 miles. It's not anything technical, it's just my own personal opinions. You may agree, you may disagree. I'm really interested to see if you agree or disagree down below. The bike itself is really a very smooth 6-cylinder 1600cc version of the RT, if I'm quite frank, because, you know, sitting in an RT cockpit is pretty much identical to sitting in the K1600 cockpit. The only thing is I'm getting about 10 miles to the gallon less. This is just about doing 50 and a little bit, maybe 52. I expect on a run with it run in, I'm not going to be doing much faster than this, to be honest, but you know, if I was on a French motorway at 80 miles an hour, for example, I would expect it to be more around the 45 to 50, but running it in, she's doing about 52 to the gallon, just so that you're fully aware. But do I love the motorcycle yet? No, I don't love the motorcycle yet, but in fairness, I've only had it for a few weeks and I've only had it for 700 miles. She is growing on me. I'm going down to France in a couple of weeks, and that will tell me how she is on a, you know, good, decent run that she's really built for. And in fact, I will be with a pillion passenger for that trip, so that's even more indicative of what this bike is really meant for. But I am liking it a great deal. Anyway, I'll be at the dealers soon, so if you've liked this video, perhaps give me a thumbs up, that'd be fantastic. Perhaps you'd like to subscribe for the channel to see how I get on with the 1600 over my tours and accessory fitting. I'm going to be doing a series of accessory fits shortly, so keep an eye out for those. I'll break them down into individual shorter videos so that you don't get too bored with me spannering on lots and lots of them, but they've been quite successful on the channel before. But I do appreciate the K1600 doesn't have as many followers as the GS does, but anyway, I should be doing a few more of those. So subscribe if you feel that you'd like to watch my tour videos, how I get on with the 1600 and some of the other videos that I do around reviewing. I might also be doing quite a few more quick ride reviews, QRR, the view from the cockpit on BMW motorcycles, so that might be an up-and-coming thing you might want to watch. It's all well and good having a configurator, but it's nice to be able to see the view from the cockpit while the bike's being ridden, and maybe it's even quite nice to have a nutter like me waffle on about it. So again, maybe worth subscribing. Comments always welcome down below, of course, and in the meantime, stay safe, ride safe, keep that shiny side up and the rubber side down is always the best way. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.